Black Ops 6 is changing the future of Call of Duty as you know it. A few days ago, Call of Duty and Activision flew me out to Treyarch HQ so I could get some hands-on experience with Black Ops 6. And although I can't elaborate on my gameplay experience yet, we can talk about the 12 things that Black Ops 6 is doing to innovate the Call of Duty franchise. But before we get into number one, if you're interested in Black Ops 6, particularly multiplayer or ranked play, drop a subscribe on this channel as I will definitely be covering that in the future. Firstly, Prestige mode is officially returning in Black Ops 6, something we haven't had in years, and to be honest, a staple of Call of Duty multiplayer. I'm glad to hear that it's returning. The specifics of how Black Ops 6's Prestige mode will work is still unconfirmed. If it'll be a hard reset like the original Modern Warfare 2 or a more forgiving reset with Prestige tokens, we will have to wait for a later date. But the fact that it's included at all is a huge step in the right direction for Call of Duty multiplayer as a whole, in my opinion. Secondly, theater mode is back for the first time on the post-Cold War Call of Duty engine. Now, anytime you hit a nasty throwing knife, a no-scope, or simply want to review gameplay, you'll be able to do that again this upcoming year. I personally can't wait to use it myself for content, and I can't wait to see what the COD community cooks up with this feature. Up next is Omni movement, a potentially genre-defining addition to first-person shooters that will be included in Black Ops 6. What Omni movement means to movement is described as no longer locking your sprint to being only forward. You can sprint in any direction you choose, and right now that doesn't sound like much, but when you factor in sliding and diving, that opens up potentially hundreds of possible Omni movement directions. And with a developer influence on movement fluidity and movement chaining, the potential skill gap has already broadened for just the movement alone. When I hear about Omni movement, it almost reminds me of the jetpack edition of Call of Duty and Advanced Warfare, although to a less flashy degree, of course. I imagine this might end up being a polarizing topic for Call of Duty players, but this news, in my opinion, is very encouraging for the future of not only Call of Duty, but the FPS genre as a whole. It's very possible that something like this gets introduced to games that are not Call of Duty, assuming, of course, that there's positive feedback once the community gets their hands on it. When we talk about sliding and diving in the current state of Call of Duty, the fact that you can only do so while facing forward is extremely limited in the comparison to a full 360 degree that Omni movement provides. Let's say we're slide canceling a doorway. Instead of having to face forward and then turn once you slide cancel through the doorway, if Omni movement works as it's described, you'll be able to sprint in the direction of the doorway while keeping your aim forward, meaning that there will be little to no correction in terms of your centering as you slide cancel. So it's possible that cameraing or peeker's advantage is going to be even more disgusting in Black Ops 6. I cannot wait to see what movement mastery ends up looking like in this Call of Duty. And speaking of movement, we're not done yet. A new feature, Supine Prone, is in Black Ops 6, and although the name itself is contradictory, it makes complete sense in the context of the game. Basically, in Call of Duty now, if you try to turn around while prone, your whole character model has to spin around, leading to prone blocks and other awkward feeling motions in-game. With Supine Prone, you would be able to turn all the way over onto your back, getting rid of the need for a whole body turning animation. Theoretically as well, when paired with a dive, it should work the same way, meaning if you dove forward and turned around, you would land on your back facing the direction that you dove from. With Omni movement, as we described earlier, you could also just simply dive backwards to the same effect, although a little less flashy. The next addition is for anyone that might be worried about advanced movement being too much to either worry about or too many inputs for controllers or keyboards, and it's intelligent movement or movement assist. It's described as a smart movement mechanic that adapts to mantles, crouches under cover, and even tactical sprints while still allowing you to fully walk forward. This addition mainly sounds like it'll be great for accessibility or for the more casual audience that doesn't necessarily have time to master the movement. But if done right, I could see this adopted towards the more sweaty audience of Call of Duty. Up next is huge news for multiplayer. There are 16 brand new 6v6 maps. And like I said, I can't get into the specifics on the maps that we got to play, but I can say that the fact that there are 16 new 6v6 maps is a super exciting thing for Call of Duty multiplayer. And that's because the developers have had plenty of time to work on this game, meaning that they don't have to rely on throwback maps or nostalgia just to make good maps. They've had time to put the effort in the testing towards making new maps, and hopefully, fingers crossed, new iconic maps that could transfer into other Call of Duty, similar to previous iconic maps like Raid, Standoff, Nuketown, so on and so forth. Like I said, we'll have to wait to get our hands on these maps, of course, but the fact that there are so many of them and so much time from a developer standpoint should be a very exciting thing, and I hope that I don't get proven wrong. The next exciting point is a dedicated melee slot for custom class, meaning that on every single class that you run, you can have not only your primary weapon and your secondary weapon, you can have the melee as well. And what has me most excited about this change is the potential future of camos or knife blueprints, something to be able to flex as you're playing in game, because some of the previous knife animations have been super cool anyways. And then of course for timing on search and destroy and off breaks of more competitive modes like hardpoint or control if they continue to go that way. The fact that you'll always have an option to pull out a melee and run faster, assuming that it works that way, I think would be an awesome change for Call of Duty and something I could see carrying forward to more Call of Duties down the road. The next point is more interface and accessibility, but HUD presets are coming to Call of Duty. My understanding of these is it might not be the customization allowed on COD Mobile where you can literally click and drag anything and make it bigger, smaller, get rid of it. It's going to be presets that might make the minimap a little bit larger, might change the location of the minimap or your ammo, your kill streaks, the kill feed, so on and so forth. But the fact that this is even an upcoming option for Call of Duty sounds super cool because I'm the type of person who makes my safe area all the way in so that my minimap will be as close to the center of the screen as possible. Fingers crossed there are presets that will do something similar. And if the community's response is good to this change, I hope there could be even more customization down the road. And the next gameplay related change is that you can shoot doors open in Black Ops 6. You no longer always have to worry about opening them, creaking them, or using a stun or a nade to open the doors. All it takes is one shot to each door, which is a great gameplay related change. I could see this being used on modes like Search and Destroy to watch crosses into buildings and whatnot. And I think this presents a happy medium for the more hardcore old school Call of Duty fans that don't like doors, and the newer age players, especially Warzone players, that do enjoy having doors in buildings. This change sounds like it would make the doors themselves less stationary, and I think is a good change for Call of Duty as a whole. Next is a shared engine between multiplayer and Warzone. If we think back to Cold War, I believe how that worked is that they completely had to port over the weapons from Cold War into Warzone to make them make sense. The fact that they've announced that they're sharing an engine between multiplayer and Warzone should make this transition really seamless, and hopefully would allow more developers to have more time towards working on actual game improvements rather than simply porting over the weapons that should already be there in the first place. And speaking of Warzone, the next point is something we need to talk about, and that's operators, blueprints, and camos carrying forward into the next game. If you remember from MW2 to MW3, all the guns, all the camos, all the operators transferred over. And how that's going to work going into Black Ops 6 is carryover will be to Warzone only. The Black Ops 6 feel and the Black Ops franchise will be contained in multiplayer to be simply the operators, guns, and camos that come with Black Ops 6. And Warzone will be used as a means to keep the customization that's been in MW2 and MW3 leading up to this point. This change makes perfect sense to me. The only time that we've really had carryover on a multiplayer side of things was from MW2 to MW3. So it's something that I wasn't necessarily anticipating to keep up, because you don't want to have all the blueprints, all the camos, all the operators on day one, and it gives more incentive to grind what Black Ops 6 actually has to offer. So W change in my opinion. And the final point for Black Ops 6 is that the studio truly believes it is the best Black Ops ever made. I've been saying this before and people have been talking about it online. This is probably the longest true development cycle that's been allowed into a Call of Duty game in a long time. And if there's any studio you can trust to put all that time into truly defining what makes a Call of Duty game a good Call of Duty game, it's Treyarch. Am I biased? Absolutely. Black Ops 2 is my favorite Call of Duty of all time, but I think it's fair to say that the previous Treyarch titles haven't necessarily been good at launch. If we look at Black Ops 4, if we look at Cold War, I feel like it took a while for those games to reach their peak when it comes to bugs, when it comes to balancing, when it comes to adding new maps like Cold War's throwback maps. I imagine that the majority of the problems that came with those games were just lack of time on the developer side of things. So coming into Black Ops 6, with years and years and years of preparation, it only leads me to a more optimistic and hopeful side of thinking. So I hope the same for you, and I hope that I don't get proven wrong. And that is how Black Ops 6 will change Call of Duty forever. Thank you again to Treyarch, Call of Duty, Activision for having me. When I'm allowed to discuss more, I will discuss more. So stay tuned on this channel, subscribe if you enjoyed, and I'll catch you next time at lunchtime.